afternoon.
It's been a very busy day here. We've got thousands of job seekers who are online who are watching our seminar today. And I suppose what with the pandemic and what's been happening, people are now looking forward to a brand new year, to 2021. Potentially things will begin to get back to normal again. And it'll be great for us to get your opinions on just how things will work in the employment market and the country in general over the next few months and into 2021.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Kevin and Brona, for inviting me to speak today. I want to take this opportunity to update you all on our plans for Ireland's economic recovery, how the pandemic has changed the world of work, and also how it's going to affect you as employers and as job seekers. As Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, my daily work is focused on leading our country through the economic crisis and helping businesses survive and helping people get back to work. Yes, the economy is facing unprecedented challenges, and now it's probably not the best time to be looking for a job. But there are opportunities. In the last week or so, we've seen businesses expanding and creating new jobs in Carlow, Cork, Limerick and Dublin. Sectors such as tech, pharma and logistics are all growing. But I don't for a minute underestimate the challenges we're all facing. In the programme for government, we committed to developing a national economic plan. And this plan will set out a pathway to a new economy for the future. The plan will set out where we want to be post-pandemic, the longer term policies to get us there, while ensuring that our short-term responses are consistent with those long-term goals. Undoubtedly, these are very difficult times, and the plan is being developed against a backdrop of real uncertainty, not just COVID, but also Brexit, which is only 40 or so days away. And while many things are uncertain, we do know that it's highly unlikely that we're going to return to the normal as it was pre-pandemic, nor do we want to, in fact. So we want to imagine a new normal and to make sure that new normal is a better normal. It's clear that this pandemic has accelerated some deep structural shifts that were already in motion, particularly when it comes to the twin transition, which is digital and green. And it's also thrown into focus some of the structural weaknesses and vulnerabilities in our economy and society. We always knew they were there, but the pandemic has shone a light on them. And we know that out of crisis comes opportunity for reform and renewal. Our economy entered this crisis in a very strong position, close to full employment, budget surplus, having recovered from a massive economic shock back in 2008. Looking forward, the Irish economy is going to be different. Things always change over time, and this will be no different. It might just happen a bit faster. We know that many of the jobs that exist today may not exist by the end of the decade, but we also know that there'll be new jobs and new occupations and new businesses, and we need to make sure that we're ready for that. The National Economic Plan will help us to be ready for these changes and opportunities ahead once we overcome this twin crisis of Brexit and COVID, both happening at the same time. So the plan is going to focus on economic, social and environmentally sustainable growth. And in measuring our overall progress, it'll rely on broader indices which capture the goals of social and environmental progress as well as economic progress. It's about giving our nation a sense of well-being and not just economic health. Some of the themes we're going to cover in the plan include building resilience across our enterprises and sectors, a socially inclusive and regionally balanced economy, future-proofing our economy and society. And I'll just focus on two of those today. First of all, a socially inclusive and regionally balanced recovery is about creating a more equal and more inclusive economy into the future. We want things to be different, better than they were in the past, not going back to the way they used to be. And I want the economy and society we have after this to be better than the one that we left behind. I think COVID-19 has forced us to take a step back, to reassess and think about the way we live our lives. So we don't want to return to the same society and economy that we had before. The pandemic gives us an opportunity to make fundamental changes for the better. A better quality of life, a better economy, a better environment, jobs that are better paid and more secure. We know that this recession has disproportionately affected younger workers, migrants, people in the private sector, the self-employed, those in more precarious work, and particularly those in customer-facing roles and industries. So in future, we need to value all of their work much more and do better by them. We must make sure that the new economy that we build has a higher floor for everyone, that there is more job security for more people, and that things like sick pay and access to a pension fund are a right and not a privilege or a benefit. So the plan is going to define how we reduce barriers to entry and progression within the labour market to target higher quality jobs. And it'll plan for improved living standards and well-being and set out just how they should be measured. These are some of the many issues which we're getting to grips with before the pandemic, but we now need to be reimagined in the current landscape. Then we have the issue of future-proofing our economy and society. There are huge opportunities from the green transition, the opportunity to create new jobs and to build new businesses, to turn Ireland from a net energy importer to a net energy exporter within a generation. And I'm determined to make sure that we in the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment see the green transition and climate action as an opportunity to create new businesses, increase trade and grow employment opportunities. It's not something that should be feared or seen as a threat, but something that we're going to embrace. And we need to make sure that this transition is a just transition, not just for workers, but also for businesses. At the same time, there's the digital transformation that is very much underway and has been accelerated by the pandemic. And this has transformed the way we work. There are opportunities arising from that too. Opportunities for better, more flexible work options, meaning better work-life balance. Opportunities for more people to work from home or in hubs in small towns and villages. Opportunities for people with disabilities to access employment that they weren't able to access in the past. Opportunities for people to live in rural communities and maybe even encourage some city dwellers to work remotely from small towns and villages, helping to revive rural Ireland. And of course, opportunities for people to commute less, which will have positive environmental effects, enabling us to reimagine our cities and city centres. I think overall we're going to see a move towards blended work, with people choosing to spend part of the week in the office, part at home, and maybe part of the week in a remote hub. And that's going to mean a lot more footfall in villages and small towns, but perhaps less footfall in our large towns and cities, which means we need to rethink things like housing and transport investment, how we use our street spaces, for example, perhaps less space for cars and more for pedestrians, more for cyclists and more space for outdoor tables and outdoor furniture. Next month, I'm going to publish the remote working strategy, bringing all of these issues together for the first time. It'll contain 5 major actions, 1 investment in digital hubs so people can work together but remotely and invigorate towns and villages. Secondly, changes to tax and expensive rules to facilitate home and remote working for the next budget. Third, financial supports for employers to install necessary facilities and equipment. Fourth, the right to request working remotely, and to have that fairly considered. And also we'll consider how we can have a mechanism by which people can disconnect from work. While the road ahead is uncertain, I want you to know that the government is working to help those who've lost their jobs, or whose jobs continue to be in a precarious position. We want to create new opportunities for people unable to return to their old jobs, and those who want to move on from their current job. The National Economic Plan will be the pathfinder for all of this. So thank you again for inviting me to speak. I really hope the rest of the day and the weekend goes well. And hopefully next time in the not too distant future, we'll be able to do this in person. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tanaiste, for those very helpful words. And if I could just ask you a couple of questions that have been sent in to us from people who are watching the seminar today. I guess the first question, which is probably quite a timely one, considering the circumstances we're in at the moment, is how can a balance be achieved between people who are coming to work who might be sick in order to earn essential money versus staying away and reducing the risk of infecting their fellow workers at this present time?
Yeah, well, first of all, particularly at this point in time, we want people who are sick not to go into work, to stay at home, because we don't want people spreading the virus. And that's why we put in place the enhanced illness benefit. If you don't get sick pay from your employer, you can avail of the enhanced illness benefit. It's €350 a week, runs for up to 10 weeks. And that covers you if you're experiencing the symptoms of COVID, waiting on a test result, or if you've been told to self-isolate or to restrict your movements. So really nobody should fear being without income if they have to do any of those things as a consequence of COVID. And I think 60,000 people have already availed of that payment. But that is just for COVID. And I want to move on now next year to bring in sick pay for all illnesses. Most people have that already from their employer, but a lot of people don't. And we need to change that, because what's true for COVID is also true for other illnesses and other infectious diseases. We don't want people going into work spreading it, and we want people to get better and get better quicker. And that means making sure that people aren't afraid to take time off work for financial reasons if they need to because they're sick.
I guess considering the increased levels of teleworking and working remotely, is there a concern with government that might lead to some of the large tech companies drastically scaling back their Irish presence, or what would the government's view on that be for the coming years?
Yeah, it's not something that I'm unduly concerned about. Despite the fact that loads of people are working from home and in some cases working from abroad, we're still seeing a lot of job announcements. 1,000 jobs being created by Amazon, TikTok going to 1,100 people working in Ireland by next year. Diligent, for example, in Galway announcing new jobs, and indeed next week there'll be new jobs announced by one of the tech firms. So I'm not overly concerned about those companies scaling down their presence or operations in Ireland, but it is something we need to be wise to. I think for the last couple of decades, when it comes to the battle for FDI, encouraging companies to come to Ireland, it's been all about attracting the company. And I think we're going to move in the next years and decades to a greater focus on attracting talent, on making our cities and towns attractive places where people will want to come. And we already are that in a way, but I think we're going to need to improve on that, particularly around the cost of housing and improving social life and including the environment, so that when we're battling for talent, and talent is going to be more mobile than ever, that people actually want to come and live in our country, in our towns and cities.
And for people who might have to consider changing career, maybe might have to pivot into a different area on account of the changing nature of how things may go over the next few years, where would you see the benefits of retraining, and how can people, focus on that, and how will that fit into what the government's plans might be over the next number of years?
Yeah, well, I think for most people, the idea of a job for life or just having one career for all of their lives is probably over. That was kind of ending anyway, but as we see the world change at a more rapid pace all the time, I think it's likely that most people are going to have more than one career and more than one occupation in their lives. And that's why we have to see education and learning as being lifelong and not something that ends after school or college. And that's kind of one of the reasons why the new government, very much on the Taoiseach's initiative, established a new department for further higher education, innovation, science, headed by Simon Harris. And through that, we're going to put a lot more investment in new training programs, training schemes, apprenticeships, short courses, long-term courses, even in the budget now restored grants for graduate students who are going back to study. And something I'm very committed to and would like to make part of our plan for the future is giving people a right to second chance education. And maybe people who didn't get the education that they ought to have got or wanted to get, having a second chance to go back to education and retrain for that new career.
And a final question from the floor as such. Of course, it's a virtual floor, but just the questions come in. So just, I guess, in light of the increase of working from home and teleworking, how is the broadband development plan coming on? And, what is the real potential for people who might be in areas that aren't served very well to be able to get broadband that will help them to work remotely into the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, well, believe it or not, it was this week last year that I signed the national broadband contract. A huge contract, €3 billion over 10 years, the biggest investment in rural Ireland ever. And a lot of people questioned it at the time, and some people opposed it, but nobody's against it anymore, because I think the pandemic has proven why we actually do need to get high-speed broadband, fibre into pretty much every home, business and farm in the country. So that is now underway. A lot of the design work is done. The first homes in Carrigaline and County Cork are going to be passed in the next couple of weeks. But it isn't something that can be done very quickly, unfortunately. It is a 5 to 7 year scheme. It's as ambitious as rural electrification was, for example, and that took 40 years. This won't take 40 years, and we are trying to speed it up. But it does mean that at a rate of connecting about 100,000 farms, businesses and homes every year, it'll still take about 5, 6, 7 years before we have that full coverage. But when we do, it's going to be worth it, and I think it will be transformative.
Thank you very much, Tanaiste, for your time today. I'm sure all the attendees of the virtual recruitment event today will have enjoyed hearing the comments you've made there. So thank you very much for taking your time out to join us today.
Thank you. Take care.